Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the RTI Press Pass podcast here on this Wednesday, December 18th edition, previewing the first round of the college football playoffs. Tennessee, that is, going to play Ohio State in Columbus. We're going to preview that game, do some basketball talk, a lot to get to here on this Wednesday, as well as some portal notes. Got my guys Ryan Schumpert and Rick Butler here with me today, as always. Rick, how you doing?
Pretty good. I can't complain too much right now. It's quite the crossover season here in Knoxville. I feel like I've mentioned that a couple of times, but not only do you have Tennessee football in the playoffs, you have Tennessee basketball as the number one team in the country, and all of a sudden you have a Tennessee women's basketball team that is as exciting as anybody to watch the way they play the game, the three-pointers they take. So not only is it an exciting time on Rocky Top right now, it's a bit of an exhausting time on Rocky Top right now, especially for us who do so much with this university in the athletics department. You know, I woke up today to drive out to get some quick breakfast before recording here, and I noticed that my back right tire was all the way down to like 23 PSI. The other tires were fine, but my back right tire was down, so I had to go. I had to fill it back up. But I feel like that might be a pretty good representation of, you know, just kind of where we are in the month of December. You know, we're pretty good to go. We're obviously going to have all of our energy, all the air in the tires for the game coming up this Saturday. But in the meantime, to get there, you might have a back right, you know, a little bit deflated, or you might have a front left a little bit deflated. So we will certainly get those back up. But, man, after a tough 4-month stretch, a grueling 4-month stretch, it's wild to think that we're now sort of in the final stretch, in the home stretch. So I'm excited to talk about this game with you guys today. I'm excited to be on here to see you guys. So I'm doing pretty good otherwise, though.
So your car having a tire low is, you know, it's symbolism, right, of what you guys are going through with the seasons merging. Definitely what Schumpert over here is going through. As
that's kind of where the reference. That's kind of where the reference was headed for the most part. So I'm glad that we're going to him next.
Ryan, you got a little low tire over there?
Yeah, a little under the weather. Been housing some cold medicine and some what was it called? Like the candies for sore throat.
Just Halls? Just the cough drop?
Cough drop. That's the phrase I was looking for. Yes.
I do not know.
I was just flying over my head. I knew what they were called.
Hey, look, he's got a flat back right tire. You know, it takes a little bit longer to get going up to full speed.
Yeah, and you saying that it's December 18th kind of like hit me over the head. I'm like, goodness, Christmas is in a week. This month has absolutely flown by, but doing well. And some Tennessee football transfer portal news we got this morning. So just a ton to talk about in the world of Tennessee athletics.
Yeah, where do you guys want to start? You want to start with the game, or do you want to take care of portal notes first? Rick, I'll let you decide.
You know, I would say the majority of this podcast will probably be spent on the game. So why don't we maybe go ahead and get the portal stuff out of the way? I know Ryan's got a little bit of breaking news that not breaking news, but at least sort of breaking news at the time of our recording today on Wednesday morning. So why don't we knock out the quick transfer portal stuff, and then we'll move into the full game preview to sort of close out the main on-course of the podcast. This will kind of be the appetizer.
Sounds good. All right, let's get to it then. This morning, Tennessee landed its first transfer of the offseason with Arizona offensive guard Wendell Moe Jr. On three, Pete Nakos was the first to report it. So, you know, Power 4 offensive linemen come to Tennessee out of the portal. This is a nice get for the Vols, Ryan.
Yeah, it is a big position in need. You know, Tennessee is going to lose at least 2 or 3 starting interior offensive linemen, and Cooper Mays and Javonte Spraggins. Left guard Andrej Carrick is out of eligibility. He is applying for an extra year of eligibility, so we'll see what ends up happening there. But a guy that I think is going to be a no-doubt plug-and-play starter for Tennessee. He started 25 games over the last 2 years for Arizona. The vast majority of those are left guard. I think it was about 4 games this past season at right guard due to some injuries. They slid him around. So a really solid player, a great guy. That's great in pass protection. He's allowed one sack in his college career, which I think it was like, ironically, keep it on the theme of the ones, 1,111 pass block snaps. He had allowed 1 sack, a little more average in the run blocking, but just a huge get for Tennessee. Tennessee needs bodies, and they need probably at least 2 guys that I would say are starting quality players on the offensive line in the portal, and to get one right away, I think it's a huge win. So he visited Auburn on Friday and Tennessee on Saturday before committing to the Vols and signing with the Vols this Wednesday. So this one's over, and just a big get.
So, Ryan, let me ask you this, because I saw in your article today, you broke down that he had been playing majority right tackle, I think you said, but also certainly has experience, or excuse me, the guard position. So right guard and left guard, has some experience playing both. We know that Javonte Spraggins is going to be out of here after this season. Do you sort of just see that as Tennessee's best available need or fit sort of for him on the offensive line? Obviously, what you just mentioned with Andre Carrick is going to play a big factor in that as well. If Andre Carrick comes back at left guard, I would imagine that maybe he slides into right guard. Do you see that just being sort of maybe best fit or need where he needs to be on that line?
Well, I mean, he's predominantly played left guard, so if Carrick comes back, one of those guys is going to have to slide over and play right guard. Yeah. So I'm not sure who that'll be. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I don't know. I can't remember how much experience. If my recollection is right, Carrick didn't play a whole lot at all at Texas. I don't know if he played any right guard while he was there, but at Tennessee, he's played nothing but left guard. And like I said, with Mo, a little bit of experience at right guard. Looking at the PFF grades, he was a little bit lower on those games at right guard. I'm not sure it was anything that you would just say, all right, 100% direct correlation. He's a lot better at left guard than right guard, but you'd maybe think he'd be the more natural guy simply from that aspect that he has a little bit of experience playing there where other guys do not.
Jack, I'll tell you this, one of the reasons why I like this as well for Tennessee, not just because of what we've been talking about with him being an experienced power forward player, with him being great in pass protection, is that Tennessee's going to lose some veterans on that offensive line as well. We know that Cooper Mays is going to be gone from the center position. We know that Javonte Spraggins is going to be gone from that right tackle position. So when you're just talking about the interior, maybe even Andre Carrick as well, being able to bring in a guy like Wendell Moe, and I know that he's not necessarily experienced in the Tennessee system, but to have a guy of that quality and caliber being able to come in, replace some of those longtime veterans, I think is always a win that you're trying to shoot for in the offseason. Tennessee might have picked one up here.
Yeah, you talked about Carrick for a second. If he had right guard experience, he actually played tackle predominantly in his redshirt freshman season. And then in his sophomore season in Austin, he, according to what my research, he mostly played as a blocking tight end. So I would imagine he would be, on the edge. So it feels like most of his interior reps have come at Tennessee, and he's obviously been at left guard. So maybe a new role for him next year. We'll see how it all shakes out if he comes back, of course.
And one note on Carrick, and I'll go one more to Mo after that. Just with Carrick and his eligibility chase, I mean, essentially it's hoping that he can get a medical redshirt from the 2023 season. He has not redshirted. I believe he had a COVID year was his freshman year, so it was not technically a redshirt year, though he didn't play. He would have been eligible for a redshirt. And in 23, to get a redshirt, you got to play in only 4 games in the regular season. He played Tennessee's first 4 games. He got hurt the 4th game of the year, which I want to say was the UTSA game. He came back against Kentucky and got hurt on the 4th play of that game. And what was a season-ending injury? So essentially, those 4 snaps against Kentucky are what kept him from getting a normal red shirt. So I would think he's got a pretty strong case. You never know with this stuff in the NCAA, but given he was 4 snaps over the limit of being able to redshirt in 2023, it feels like with 2 separate injuries, it feels like it's possible. And then with Mo, not a huge one, but a little bit of a Tennessee tie here. He's from Long Beach, which is where Nico is from as well. He's a year older than Nico in school, so I'm not totally – they didn't play at the same high school. I'm not totally sure what their previous relationship is like, but from the same area, both Polynesian, you would think maybe some sort of connection there. Or at least I'm sure 2 guys that were very aware of each other coming up in the high school scene.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, if Brew McCoy knew, I remember I think that was asked to Brew McCoy at some point this year, was just, hey, did you know of Nico beforehand? And he said, yeah, being in California at the same time, you're gonna have a pretty good sense of who the top players are and who the top prospects are.
Let's get to the departures real quick. Nothing that's just massive news for the departures here, but a lot of wide receivers: Chaz Nimrod, Nathan Laycock, Caleb Webb. That's the trio of wide receivers departing via the portal. You got linebacker Jalen Smith, cornerback Jordan Matthews, running back Khalifa Keith, and center Bison Lang. So, Rick, I'll start with you. Which one sticks out the most to you here of these? It was 7 departures so far.
Yeah, well, I think from a broad perspective, it's got to be the wide receivers, I'd imagine, just because there are 3 young, developing wide receivers who have been in your system for a good couple years now, And it's sort of as they're starting to maybe hit that point where they can contribute, they go ahead and exit the portal. But I'd say that maybe the name that some people have been reacting to the most has been Jalen Smith. And Jalen Smith has been good for Tennessee in the back half of the season this year, but he's also been thrust into this role because of a pair of fairly high-profile injuries, right? I did not expect that we'd be talking about Jalen Smith as a true on-field contributor here at the back half of the season, but I also did not necessarily forecast that both Keenan Peely and Edwin Spillman were going to be on the shelf for most of the year. So I think that some people have really sort of keyed in on Jalen Smith heading towards the portal just because they're so used to seeing him, especially in these back couple of games. But at the end of the day, that one's not too surprising either. And I think that if those injuries had not happened, we would have been in the same position as we are now. So maybe from a broad perspective, the wide receivers, I certainly want to hear Ryan's take on the wide receiver room and how that could affect the game coming up this weekend. But just from an individual player, I think that I've certainly seen some people reacting to the Jalen Smith news, but that one wasn't too surprising to me either because, again, felt like that could have been a likely possibility. And even though he did get time on the field this year, it was, he earned it, but it was also because of some of those injuries to the players in the room as well. So that's kind of what stuck out to me right away.
Yeah, no, I'll talk about Jalen Smith because that's the one that stands out to me the most. Like, one, I don't know if Spillman would have been ahead of him in the depth chart. My guess would have been no, at least early in the season, if he was healthy. And you're right, Rick. It doesn't surprise me from the standpoint of, like, Tennessee has basically, besides Keenan Peely, every single other linebacker back. They brought in a talented class with 3 guys and 2 guys in Jaden Harmon and Christian Gass, who I think will push for playing time early. But for him to transfer and not be with the team for the playoffs, I don't know if it's necessarily surprising, but it does rub me the wrong way. It's an old man take, and I don't mean to put all of it on Jalen Smith. Like, it's just a crappy system in which it is a lot more advantageous to enter the portal now as opposed to after. But even if he enters the portal now, like, why can't I know a couple? Like, I think Ohio State's backup quarterback, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe it's Penn State. One of those guys is entering the portal, but is staying with the team through the playoff. And I know that's the case.
That's SMU. My bad.
No, SMU. Okay.
But
and I know it's been I know that's been the case for a couple different players, and it's just like, I don't know. My thing is this: like, what are you doing? What are you playing college football for? Maybe it's to make it to the NFL. It's certainly possible, and maybe I'm being a skeptic by saying that I'm doubtful that Jalen Smith's going to get more than a cup of coffee in the NFL. And if you're transferring because of the situation at Tennessee, you're either hoping that another one of these big schools has less linebacker depth and you can go there and make it to the playoff, or you're going down to a maybe not a smaller level, but a less predominant school to where you can start and be a full-time starter. And it's just like, and if you're doing that, making the NFL seems, it would just lend to my point that making the NFL seems doubtful. So to me, it's just kind of like, what are we doing here? Why are you not trying to play in the college football playoff and win a national championship? Like, is that not why you go play college football? And all the other guys I get, like, besides Chaz Nimrod, none of those guys play at all.
Yeah.
Jalen Smith has played 20+ snaps every single game since Keenan Peely's been out. He has had a very, very major role on Tennessee's defense. So, look, I get that it's the way of the world, and
he was on the SEC all-freshman team. I mean, that's not something that you just accidentally stumble onto. That's you've got to do something to earn your way there.
For sure. And look, I get that it's the way of the world now, and I get that. I don't mean to, just crap on Jalen Smith. I think some of it's just a bad system that lends credence to it being better for him to enter the portal now. But I do think that one's one that, there's a lot of moments here. Like, what in the world are we doing in college football? And a dude that plays consistent snaps every game on defense entering the portal before the playoffs is one of them for me.
And as a direct backup at a rotational position too. Like, it's going to affect Tennessee. I mean, Tennessee's already, shallow at linebacker. They're even more shallow now going to the playoffs. So this is the one that hurts Tennessee the most in the short term. Chaz Nimrod, you could argue he's contributed. That's one that I thought, with what Tennessee's wide receiver room is now and the uncertainty surrounding it next season, maybe Chaz could have stayed and had a great camp and solidified himself as a starter next season. But obviously he's departing. So those two were the headliners for me. As you said, Ryan, pretty much everyone else, Keith, the other two receivers, Webb, and especially Laycock, Matthews, these guys weren't going to play this playoff, and they weren't in great positions to earn starting spots next year either. So it made complete sense for all those other guys to transfer. Those were the two that kind of made me, do a double take, if you will.
Hey, and to Ryan's credit as well, I mean, I remember talking about that. What was he, 23 recruiting class, I believe it was? And he was and he was a higher ranked 3-star player. And I remember, Ryan especially was beating the drum of, hey, this is one of the underrated prospects that Tennessee's bringing in right now. I know you just see 3 stars next to his name, but you were saying that, hey, I believe that he is going to be good. He can be a contributor for Tennessee. Sure enough, you get to a position where he's got to play an important role for the Vols defense as injuries come down. And Ryan's got a great point. Just sort of, it's wild to get to a point in college football where some players are in it for a championship run. Some players are in it for playtime towards the NFL. Some people are in it for the money at this point. And you just, it all kind of comes together in this weird month of December where there's so much movement. There's so much activity. You can, it's free agency. I think somebody even said that in an interview. It might have even been one of the Tennessee coaches just sort of using that phrase to describe the season. Maybe he was the SMU head coach. I know he was not happy about it either. So it's just kind of a crazy world that we're in with college football right now. And certainly Tennessee is not, not immune from being in those conversations as well.
No, definitely not. And to hit on the receiver room some, yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting from the standpoint of, like, Tennessee's just had so many injuries at receiver. So, like, Chas Nimrod not being there or not playing the playoffs on the surface isn't a huge deal, but they're so banged up. I mean, practice was open for about 10 minutes on Tuesday, and about the entire receiver room had red non-contact jerseys on, and we know how banged up that room's been. So it could end up mattering if some guys get re-injured in that game or some guys aren't able to go. In the long term, I mean, it's just super interesting. We talked about it, I think, probably more on the Chase Thomas podcast than we have on here. Just like, what does the receiver room look like next year? It feels like there may be an overhaul there, and you've seen Tennessee lose a ton of guys. Now, a lot of it being depth pieces, and we've seen Tennessee not, to this point, still very early on, but at this point, not really be overly aggressive pursuing guys, receivers in the portal. So I think that's going to be really interesting to look at going forward. And then one other guy I'll touch on is just Jordan Matthews. Like, he's a guy I'm still high on. Like, I think will be a good player somewhere, but hard to fault him for entering the portal. I mean, he's the same grade that Jermon McCoy is, the same grade that Ricky Gibson is. Jalen McMurray's back, who was ahead of him on the depth chart this year. So a guy that it's like, all right, tough to see him leave because I think he's going to be a good player somewhere. But at the same time, it was hard to see a whole lot changing for his role going into next year. And at least I feel like Caleb Beasley should be in a spot where he can step up into that fourth corner role and be pretty competent as well.
When you talk about the wide receiver room, and this is going to sort of go into the Ohio State conversation as well, but I do think that it's not necessarily a storyline that you absolutely have to know about if you're a fan watching this game to be prepared for it. But I think you do have to kind of understand the idea of, hey, Tennessee has been banged up in the wide receiver room this year. I mean, there's been plenty of games where, Dante Thornton didn't finish the game, Squirrel White didn't finish the game, whoever it might be. If you get to a situation like that, I remember, Caleb Webb in the last couple of weeks, I believe, has at least gotten a couple of runs as Tennessee is trying to get healthy and fresh players out onto the field to kind of close out these games. What's going to happen if Tennessee does get to a disadvantageous position with their wide receivers in terms of injury? Is it going to be somebody who we haven't really seen much be called upon this year? Could Tennessee maybe move into that 12-man personnel that we've seen a couple times this year? I don't know, but I do think that is maybe one of the positions, at least factoring in the portal conversations, where you do have to think, hey, if things don't go Tennessee's way in the game on Saturday, what is going to be their answer? What is going to be sort of what they do in the depth? I think that's an important storyline to watch for. Again, maybe not the most important storyline that you need to know about, but I do think it could play into effect as you're watching the game coming up this Saturday from Ohio.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And just going back to the portal thing too, I went into portal season thinking Tennessee was going to get a lot of wide receivers, be very aggressive, as you mentioned, Ryan. We'll see how that plays out, but it's still a storyline I'm intrigued by heavily because it's obviously one of the most important positions, and there's just so much uncertainty around it right now for Tennessee. Let's hop into the game this weekend. Not the game not Michigan, Ohio State, but Tennessee, Ohio State in
Lowercase T,
lowercase T and
the
G.
game.
Well, if Tennessee potentially wears those mock-up Michigan orange and black jerseys, you could throw the capitalization back on. I've loved those mock-ups. I think Grant Ramey had a great post about it at the beginning of last week with the dark mode reveal Spider-Man video thing.
It's the kryptonite Michigan style uniforms. Ohio State.
Yeah.
Yeah, instead of go big orange, it's just go blue this weekend. Ball fans, that'll get in their heads. Anyway, 8 p.m. Eastern time on ABC. Ohio State 7.5-point favorites. I believe still the line. It was when I checked last. So around a touchdown, if it's not. This is the first time these two programs have met since '96 Citrus Bowl, the '95 season. Peyton Manning was quarterback then, so there's not any recent history to go off of with these two opponents. It's a big time game, and I think that the biggest key, I'll start with my key before I kick it to you guys, is just Tennessee's defensive line versus Ohio State's offensive line. Ohio State's offensive line hasn't been great. It's been very banged up here in the second half of the season, and this is obviously a strength of Tennessee's. And, this is kind of what we talked about going into the Georgia game, and the pass rush was non-existent. I do think the pass rush is going to have to make an impact on this game. I think it can, and I think Tennessee will do a pretty good job of stopping the run too. So this is my favorite matchup for Tennessee's side of things, is the defensive line versus Ohio State's offensive line, which is obviously one of the most important positions of any game of football. So this is where you should be optimistic about for Tennessee's chances here.
For sure, 100%. If Tennessee's going to win the game, their defensive line has to dominate, or at least control the line of scrimmage. And in that sense, to me, it feels a lot like the Georgia game. And that you circle that as a big key. You say this should be an advantage for Tennessee. And Tennessee's run defense and defensive line played to run really well in the Georgia game, but the pass rush was obviously non-existent. So the pass rush needs to be there in this game. I think my inkling is that Ohio State is going to have to throw the ball well to have success offensively in this game. So Tennessee is going to need to have a pass rush that's really disruptive and create some negative plays and makes life difficult on Will Howard. So I completely agree. I think there's like three areas you could kind of go for. Very rarely is my three keys in a game been as, and I'll have that on Friday, has been as definitive as it feels for this one. And that is certainly one of them to me, Jack. So Tennessee's defensive line and pass rush in particular needs to be Tennessee's best unit in this game, honestly.
Well, enlighten us on another one, Ryan. What's another one of your big keys here?
Wait, just real quick, just sticking with the just one more point on the defensive line. Throughout the week, I've been listening to a lot of the talking heads talking about this game because this is the game to be talking about as far as first round playoff games go. One of the clips that I'd listened to or that had come up when I was watching the screen was Colin Cowherd and Joel Klatt talking about this game. I know, you can say what you will about both of those guys. Obviously, some people have different opinions on them based on what they do. But here's what Joel Klatt had to say, who is a Big Ten guy, I believe, who has watched plenty of Ohio State. Is that right, Jack?
Yeah, I mean, he's a Fox guy.
Fox game.
Colorado alum, but yeah,
okay,
he's a Fox
guy. Here's what he said, quote, if you look at games in which Ohio State struggled, mainly on the offensive side, you would point to the Nebraska game and you would point to the Michigan game. The thing that Nebraska and Michigan had is they were very stout in the interior of their defensive line. That's the whole deal. And a team that was committed in Ohio State to running the football on the opposite side, those two teams had terrible offenses, and Ohio State survived it against Nebraska with a fourth down goal line stand and their defense and didn't survive against Michigan. So this is not a great matchup for Ohio State, not in the least. That at least tells me, well, it confirms what I thought about going into this game too. It confirms to me that Tennessee's interior of the defensive line is going to be an impact factor in this game. How well is Tennessee's defense going to be able to shut down Ohio State's run game? I think that Ohio State might even be a little bit taken back by just how much more physical Tennessee is than some of the other opponents that they've played this year. I don't think that Ohio State's going to necessarily be able to get a consistent attack on the ground against this Tennessee defensive line. So to Ryan's point a second ago, how does that sort of affect things through the air? Is it going to make a bigger priority for those wide receivers on the outside in the cold, in a little bit of windy conditions? I believe somebody told me that snow was in the forecast yesterday. I don't know if that's entirely true, but in those conditions that December type of football presents, what is going to happen there? So I absolutely think that you guys are right. I think a lot of people are talking about this Tennessee's interior, the defensive line especially, going to be an impact factor in this game. How well can the Vols sort of take away the run game from Ohio State? And then that leads to some other points down the road, but we'll get there. So, Ryan, back to you.
Well, I'll go off of your point because it was something I was going to make, and I'll lead it into my point. Is the weather maybe an advantage to Tennessee?
I think
stylistically,
isn't it very funny that Tennessee?
I wrote about this.
You could argue Tennessee is more of a Big Ten built team than Ohio State.
Yeah,
like they are definitely not as flashy. They're not as quick on the perimeter. Like Tennessee plays big boy football, and they're just going to pound you. And that's what Big Ten's all about.
Yeah.
I wrote about that this week. I mean, I do think that that's maybe not an advantage for Tennessee, but it's funny hearing a lot of people talk about can Tennessee go up to Ohio? Oh, it's so cold there. Name the number of
all the treetop narratives, right? Of South going to North, and
yes.
And it's cold for the Cali kid. Oh,
it was snowing here in Knoxville. Yeah, I mean, it was snowing here in Knoxville last week. Now, granted, it was only for a couple of hours in the early morning, but it was also when Tennessee was outside practicing. Name the number of games that these two teams have played post December 16th in the outside cold. The answer is 0. Neither team has done so in recent memory. So I've been agreed with that point of like, is this really that much of a disadvantage? Is this Tennessee can't play in the cold and Nico's a California quarterback? Well, I think that Dylan Sampson is not a California player. I think that Dylan Sampson just wants the ball and wants to find a hole to run through. Then you get to the point of, I'm kind of losing it, so I might go ahead and just throw it back to one of you. But, during the press conference yesterday, we had Nico Iamaleava talking to the media, and somebody asked him, they said, look, man, do you do you think about the weather? Is that something that factors into your game plan? Is that something that you guys think about? Or is this more of just a media and a fan-driven, storyline and narrative?
Yeah.
And Nico kind of did his, casual, laid-back laugh, and he said, I think it's just you guys who are talking about that more. So Tennessee is definitely aware of whatever the weather is going to be. But I do think that we in the media, I think that the fans, the fan bases as well, I think that they might be talking about the weather a little bit more than Tennessee or Ohio State, for that matter, is concerned about it. I think they just want to put the ball down and go play.
It's overblown. Yeah.
But that's a good point. I mean, I don't think that Tennessee's at a disadvantage, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, the teams aren't going to talk about it, and certainly Tennessee's not. I mean, Josh Heupel's from the Dakotas, so he knows all about cold weather. It's not going to be
is June weather for him. That's crazy.
But my key was going to be Tennessee running for over 150 yards. That's been the number in Ohio State games this year. Their 2 losses. I think Oregon ran for like 153 yards. Michigan ran for 177 yards. This defense has been phenomenal all season. They have been first in the Big Ten in about every single statistic besides rush defense. They're just good in rush defense, where they're pretty much really good or great everywhere else. So that's a number I would circle. You mentioned that the other 2 close games they played, Penn State and Nebraska, I think they both ran for around 120, 125. It's been hard for everybody besides Oregon to throw the football on Ohio State this season. And certainly Tennessee's going to need some balance in this game. But I look at that 150 number is the one that's been – the teams that have gotten over it, they've done enough offensively to win. And the teams that haven't have been unsuccessful.
Yeah, I think if Tennessee's going to win – it requires it to stick to its identity. And if Tennessee gets behind early, I don't think it's going to bode well. This is obviously not a team that's ever been built to come back this season. And I don't know if you want to put it on Nico and these wide receiver shoulders, right? To go out there and win this game. Tennessee has to dictate pace. Dylan Sampson has to have a good game, do what he does, stay ahead of the sticks. So I think they can. I mean, as you said, Ryan, we've seen teams do it. And I think you could put Tennessee's ground attack up against anybody else's in the nation with how good Dylan Sampson has been this year, seriously. And, I think you have to feel confident in Dylan Sampson's ability to have success against this Ohio State defense. But Tennessee just can't get cute. That's a very, commonly used phrase, and it's maybe too commonly used, but it's true. Tennessee just can't get out of their skis. They have to stay with their identity here in this game, or else it can get hairy quick. Because I do think, we'll talk about the other side of the ball here in a minute, but I do think Ohio State could find success in the aerial attack against Tennessee's defense, which could lead to Tennessee having to, stay up to snuff and stay on pace and score.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And kind of following up on that point, and Jack and I said we might flip to another side of the ball, so I'll just sort of keep this as a broad for all sides of the ball. I think that the red zone is going to be, to me, the most important thing about this game. If Ohio State moves down the field, they've got one of the best, if not the best, red zone attack in the country. Tennessee, on the other hand, though, has had a stout defensive front, defensive unit in the red zone as well. I mean, I think I can think of a couple different occasions. Big fourth down goal line stops for Tennessee this season. You think about when they forced the fumble, I believe it was on Graham Mertz in the Florida game, and that was right there on the goal line as well. Tennessee's defense has been very good in the red zone. To me, that's where I see this game being won and lost. If Ohio State can go down the red zone and continuously put the ball in the end zone, I think that's tough, because that's telling me that, hey, Tennessee's defense is not only struggling to sort of keep them at further lengths down the field, but they're also being able to take advantage and capitalize in the red zone. If this is a situation where Tennessee can force some touchdowns into field goals, or even field goal attempts, maybe you get a wind gust, maybe that misses. I think that's where Tennessee can really sort of pick up some steam in this game. Then on the flip side of the ball as well, Tennessee's got to be able to punch the ball into the end zone. Obviously, Ohio State is saying the same thing, but you've got a great rushing attack. You've got an offensive line that's fully healthy and full strength, and you've got a trio of tight ends that want to go in there and block. I mean, you got to use Dylan Sampson in the red zone. You got to figure out a way just to push him into the red zone. Field goals are okay. As long as you're getting points up on the board, that's okay. But you don't want too many of those possessions to turn into field goals instead of touchdowns as well. So I really think on both sides of the ball for both teams, I think this first round playoff game, I think whoever advances to go play Oregon has won the red zone battle in this game.
Yeah.
That doesn't bode well for Tennessee, I don't think. I mean, Ohio State's been really good on both sides of the red zone, and Tennessee's red zone offense has not been very good, especially when they can't just line up and run it in at people. And maybe they'll be able to do that against Ohio State, but it's going to be very challenging.
No doubt.
We've talked about a lot here. Tennessee's defensive line versus Ohio State's offensive line. Nico, the run game for Tennessee. Another storyline in this game that I think is big is just Will Howard and these Ohio State weapons against this Tennessee secondary. Will Howard, he's not the greatest quarterback in the world. He's obviously solid, but he can have a bad game, especially if pressure's in his face. But I think he also has the ability to carve Tennessee up a little bit, and that's because of the wide receiver talent Ohio State has. Jeremiah Smith, Mecca Egbuka, you guys know those names, and Carnell Tate, remember him? Almost a Tennessee commit back in the day. He's a pretty good player for the Buckeyes. So these trio of wide receivers against Jermod and Ricky and the rest of Tennessee's secondary, Tennessee secondary is not horrible. It's definitely better than in years past. And Jermod McCoy is a great, great player. And Ricky Gibson has had some great moments this year too. I'm not saying it's a definite, thing that Tennessee's just going to get diced up by these Ohio State wide receivers, but it is a very tough matchup. And it's going to be crucial for McCoy and Gibson and these guys to have a good game.
For sure. And I think you circle Gibson a lot because you know what McCoy is, and you feel like he is put him up against anybody in the country, and he might lose some battles, but he's gonna win his fair share of battles too. And we saw that against Ryan Williams in the Alabama game. But Ohio State, I think, has a depth at the receiver core that Tennessee has not faced this year, and I think that's why Ricky Gibson's really important. He played great down the stretch of the season. You need him to play really well in this game. I think you circle the star spots too, whether that's Boo Carter or Christian Harrison. Those guys are going to need to be good. I do think
they'll go up against Egbuka, who's in the slot. He's one of the best slot receivers in the country.
Yep. So that's going to be a very tough task. And I think the one thing you find some comfort in, I guess, is that Ohio State has not turned to tight ends much. And that's an area we've seen Tennessee be vulnerable. We saw Georgia carve them up that way, but I think in a lot of ways it's just replaced by Egbuka in the slot. And he's going to be a guy that's going to try to attack Tennessee over the middle of the field a lot, and maybe more of those responsibilities will fall on the star. But I'd say the star spot's basically just as big as a question mark in pass coverage. Maybe not quite as big, but certainly closer to the linebackers and safeties in pass coverage than it is the two outside corners. So
I would agree.
I think it's a major question, and more than anything, this is going to need to be a complete rounded team performance from Tennessee in the pass defense. A lot of games you could put Jermon McCoy in, he could take away a number one, and the pass rush be solid, and other teams don't really have the weapons to take advantage of Tennessee's pass defense or maybe some of their weaknesses. Ohio State does have those weapons, so it's going to need to be a complete performance for the Vols.
Guys, one of my bold predictions for this game is I think that Tennessee's secondary is going to do something that changes this game. I don't know if that's going to directly lead to a win. I'm not going to say that, but I think that I don't know if it's going to be McCoy. I don't know if it's going to be Gibson, maybe even a Boot Carter making a big play, but I think that somebody's going to get a big turnover in this game for the Tennessee secondary. I just like the way that they've been playing recently. I like the tenacity that those guys possess just as individual football players. Last week I was actually talking to a former Tennessee defensive back, somebody who was very, very good during his time here. And one of the things I wanted to ask him was just, hey, how impressive has Jermon McCoy been to you, right? To come over during the offseason and to not only keep his game very well from where it was at Oregon State to elevating it to becoming a first-team All-SEC type player. How impressive is that to you from what you've seen? And he raved about Jermon McCoy a pretty good bit, but then also said that he loves the way that Ricky Gibson plays. He says that he might not get the on his back in the end zone type interceptions that Jermon McCoy has had. Jermon McCoy has been very good with interceptions so far this year, but he says that Ricky Gibson is a phenomenal player in terms of his technique, his footwork, his release, things of that nature. Says that he even kind of reminds him of Sauce Gardner a little bit just in the way that he plays. Now, that's obviously a lofty comparison, but something that I took as, hey, you played this game, not only at Tennessee, but in the NFL. You know a lot more about this than me. If you're going to say that, then I'm going to kind of believe that to be true. So I don't know who it's going to be. Maybe Gibson, maybe McCoy. Certainly McCoy might be the likely candidate. But who knows? Maybe if Boot Carter or Will Brooks makes a big play. But I think that one of my bold predictions is that somebody in the secondary comes up with a big turnover, a big interception, something along those lines, to change the momentum in this game. Now, again, I don't know if it's going to affect the final score, but I think that it's going to be a timely interception that could be big for Tennessee.
Well, you saw Will Howard make some mistakes in that Michigan game, so he's certainly prone to it. It can happen.
Yeah.
2 picks. So,
you guys might know this. Sorry to interrupt, Jack. You guys might know this answer better than I do. Where does Will Howard sort of rank on the tier of quarterbacks that Tennessee has played this year? I would imagine maybe under Carson Beck. Milroe's kind of hard to categorize because he is such a run first, a dual threat kind of guy. Just where does Will Howard rank in terms of who Tennessee has seen on the opposite side of that line?
I mean, Beck and Milroe have been so inconsistent, right? Like, you could argue Howard is 1, but you could argue he's 4. Like, I guess I'd say he's 3rd. Just
in that range.
Okay. I would say, and look, Jack's, I'm sure, has watched Will Howard play a lot more than me. So, but I would say he kind of reminds me of like a Graham Mertz that can run a little bit more. That's kind of the comparison I would make. Which I would think you're right. I mean, Milroe and Beck have been so inconsistent, and Milroe was very, very bad Milroe against Tennessee, and Beck was very, very good Beck against Tennessee. So hard to judge, but
it's like Beck and Milroe's upsides are way higher than Will Howard's. But it does feel like Howard hasn't shown a floor as low as those two. And maybe he did against Michigan, right? But that was such a weird game plan by Ohio State. They just kept running the ball. I don't know what, that was a big storyline there. So I don't think they'll do that against Tennessee. If they do, it'll bode well for Tennessee because you beat Tennessee throwing the ball. I think Chip Kelly knows that.
Yeah.
All right. Of course, we never do score predictions here, but I just kind of want to get a lean here when you think about these two teams. A couple of fun facts, by the way. Tennessee has lost 21 straight road games versus top 10 teams. The last win at number 10 Georgia in 2006. It's 18 years ago. Can they do it again? We'll see. Ohio State has been an SEC team, regardless of the venue, since the 2014 season. Of course, that was against Alabama in the Sugar Bowl, which was a CFP semi game.
First college football playoff.
Yep.
Some people might fight you on that first one being a fun fact, but I liked it, Jack. It gave me a good laugh. I went, wow, 21. Oh, that's a bigger number than I thought.
Yeah. Well, they play a lot of top 10 teams. You play them in Georgia every year. It happens. But yeah, the Ohio State fact is you talked about that being the first, if Ohio State were to win, their next win against an SEC team would be in the first year of the new CFP. So
in the Saturday night game too. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Obviously
Hey,
a couple weeks earlier because that was New Year's Day. But yeah,
before we get into predictions, I wanted to know what you guys have made of all this ticketing conversation so far this week with the rumors of the OSU presale code and Trey Wallace is reporting about talking to StubHub and 37% of the tickets have come from Tennessee and 34% of the aftermarket tickets have come from Ohio. Just what are your guys' expectations for how Tennessee fans actually travel for this game? Do you think that the invade the shoe sort of rallying cry mantra on social media, do you think it could come to fruition? Do you think it's a little bit exaggerated, maybe somewhere in the middle? What do you make of all this chatter online so far this week?
all right, I have a couple thoughts. One, I'll say I don't really know what to expect. Like how many? It does seem like a lot of Tennessee people are coming.
It does.
I will say that the resale ticket stuff's like, I'm not saying it's not notable, but it's like, well, yeah, the vast majority of Ohio State people buy their tickets through Ohio State, so they don't need to use the secondary market, whereas Tennessee people need to use the secondary market. So to me, that's not surprising at all. A misstep, a miscalculation by Ohio State was the Scarlet the stadium thing. Because, and I noticed, and my dad's going to the game, Tennessee people don't own, or not many Tennessee people. I'm sure some people do, but there's less orange cold weather gear. Like Tennessee doesn't have a lot of sporting events in 30-degree weather, so people don't have like. I'm sure some people have some like Tennessee starter jackets, but most people don't. My dad was saying he needs to buy an orange toboggan this week, so he has something orange to wear in the stadium. Where if Ohio State was not doing that, I think you're going to see a lot of Tennessee fans there in like primarily gray and black. To where if Ohio State was just said wear whatever color, you would just assume those people are Ohio State fans.
Yeah.
But now that they're doing the scarlet and the shoe, anybody that's in black or gray is going to stand out as a Tennessee fan, and it's going to be a lot more notable. So that's a thought on that.
That's a
I
great
think
point.
Is a miscalculation by Ohio State.
It's a great
When it
point.
comes to how many people are actually going to be there, I don't know. I'm sure there'll be a lot of Tennessee fans. I do feel confident in that. Is it going to be a takeover or anything like that? Color me a little bit skeptical there, but it does seem like a lot of Vol fans plan on making the trip up to Columbus.
Yeah, I would be skeptical of the takeover too. That is interesting about the color scheme. I didn't think.
I mean, you see it in Neyland in November. Like in Neyland in November, it's way more black and gray than you see early in the season when it's almost predominantly orange and some white.
Yeah, I guess you're right. The idea of the scarlet out is to maybe sort of drown out some of the orange, make it look, a little bit similar, but there's not going to be a lot of big orange parkas, I would imagine. I imagine there'll be a lot of number 16 jerseys that are covered up by a big old North Face jacket and either a black or a orange. I'm not going to say toboggan because I'm not, that's your weird, it's your weird word, not mine. They'll have the black or orange beanies on. A little bit of geography difference with the language there.
Let me begin by saying I have no idea if I'm right on this. Like literally zero. But I think
good way to start.
That the difference is beanies have the thing on the top.
Okay. The little
ball. Whereas toboggans, it's like if you see just a flat cap, that's a toboggan.
Which I hate the balls. If anyone
What?
If anyone buys me a beanie, I cut it off. I cut the.
How do you cut it off?
Why? Because I don't think it looks good. I think it looks silly.
Oh. I'm from. Yeah, that's it. Ryan's got the snip going right there. You're a little too young for the snip.
Yeah.
No, you're
maybe reconsider there, pal.
That will get clipped out and sent into our group text here in about 45 minutes or so. Let me go ahead and timestamp this. I never even heard the word toboggan until I moved to the state of Tennessee in the year of 2015. So that just was never even close.
So what's it, a sled to you? It's like a sled, right? It's a sled, right? That's what a toboggan is.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
exactly what it
I
was. I
know.
had no idea it was a piece of clothing. I was like, you guys are
I
crazy
know
over here.
Northerners get really mad when you call a beanie a toboggan. So I guess
Yeah.
Rick is Texas is basically the North is culturally is what
Yeah.
is what
What we've
is the
deducted here.
conclusion that we're coming to. Yeah.
We never established those rules down there, so we're just kind of in no man's land unless you get that one freeze. But yeah, that has been a long time debate with me and my friends.
Okay, that's funny. Yeah, no, I've had a lot of people get mad at me. You're not the first one that's been like, that's nonsense calling it a toboggan. So
All right, guys. What's the lean here? Touchdown favorite for the Buckeyes, give or take. I say Tennessee covers, and I say Tennessee wins.
wow. I say Tennessee covers, Ohio State wins. I know everybody's shocked to hear me be pessimistic about Tennessee's chances, but it just kind of feels to me. It feels a lot like the Georgia game. Wouldn't be surprised if Tennessee wins it all. It's you can see multiple paths to Tennessee winning the game. It's not like there's just one really narrow path. There's multiple paths, but Ohio State's the more talented team. I do think they're the better team. They're playing at home. Those three things makes me lean with Ohio State.
I like Ohio State's roster a lot. You know, I know a lot of people think back to that immediate Michigan game. That was a rivalry game. That is a death game for them. That is a game they haven't won in a long time. I think you look at the other portion of their season to sort of factor in what Ohio State's going to be on the field, and they've been really good on the field this year. They've got elite talent for a reason. You've heard a lot of the talking heads around college football call it one of the best, if not the best roster in college football. I don't know what the star rankings indicate, but I would have to imagine they're up there in the top 2 or 3. But I think that, man, if there's a time for Tennessee to make a statement, and if there's a team and a place for Tennessee to make a statement, it's against an Ohio State fan base that, yes, it might be the vocal minority, but it's a group of people who are a little bit restless going into this game. They hated losing to Michigan a couple weeks ago. I know I talked about that. I didn't really factor that in based on on-field performance, but I do play it as a major factor when talking about just where is this fan base? Where is this environment going to be? I don't think, I don't foresee Ohio State running out onto the field in pregame and just a cascade of boos come down. But I do think that maybe this is a situation where you go back to that Georgia game a couple weeks ago. Tennessee jumps out to a 10-0 lead in the first quarter. Georgia is strong enough and confident enough to where they know that they can come back. Their fans never left that game. That was a dirty atmosphere for all 4 quarters of that game. Maybe this is a situation where if Tennessee can pop out to a 10-0 lead on Ohio State, then you get some pockets of the fan base who get upset, where the boo birds do start getting, where the boo birds do start coming out. Maybe you have a situation where Ohio State gets 2 third and longs to start the game and they don't convert either. You get a little bit of restlessness from the crowd. So I like Ohio State on the field. I think that Tennessee does have some of the intangibles that they can take advantage of. But at least right now, as we stand on Wednesday, I am leaning towards Ohio State. I will say, I think I'm going to flip to Tennessee by the time that we write our predictions on Fridays. I'm not positive on that. I've got to do a prediction for an Ohio State website later on today. So I'm really stressing out about what I'm going to pick for the game if they ask. But
so here at noon
right now,
on Wednesday, you're saying I'm picking Ohio State, but I'm probably going to flip.
Yeah, I really think that's what's going to happen. I don't know. There's just been a lot of excitement about this game. I'm convincing myself that Tennessee's got, like Ryan said, a couple of different routes that they can win in this game. And I'm probably, in my head, I'm probably making a little bit too much out of the whole fan base, Tennessee's and Ohio State's storyline. But right now I'm going to say Ohio State, but I'm probably going to flip that to Tennessee by the end of the week. Just knowing myself.
All right. Fair point. Ryan, did you want to do anything basketball-wise before we head on out of here real quick? Obviously, the Illinois win happened since we've last podcasted. Huge win, buzzer beater, Jordan Gainey taking it away.
Yeah, no, we'll keep it. I'll keep
team.
it broad. I'll keep it broad, given it's been a little bit since that game. But I think it's a huge game for what Tennessee's first close game of the season, and to see them respond that way with some of their top guys in foul trouble, I think was really encouraging. I mean, it was the complete just hang around and try to steal a late game is what it felt like to me, and that's exactly what Tennessee did. So I think you're seeing again Tennessee maybe not the deepest of teams, but has 7 really good guys. And you saw D-Stone Dubar come in and be a good 8th man in that game. I think that was big. And I think that's the type of win at the end of the season. You can look back and there's a difference in being a number 1 seed and a number 2 seed. So a big win there. And now Tennessee beat Western Carolina last night, a good MTSU team, and then a solid Norfolk State team to close non-conference play. MTSU maybe not a complete gimme given that it's 2 days before Christmas, but Tennessee should be unbeaten going into SEC play.
And the number 1 team heading into 2025.
Yep. And we are like a Florida win to open SEC play at Kentucky away from Tennessee at Florida, second game of SEC play being like number 1 versus number 3 in the country, both teams being undefeated.
Huge.
Just a heavyweight battle in January. So that's that. And I will say, to tie it all together, Jack, you talked about it, not a whole lot of history between Tennessee and Ohio State and Hardwood. A lot of history and bad blood between the Vols and the Buckeyes, on the gridiron and the Hardwood. A lot of history. Tennessee in, I believe, 2008, maybe now I think it was 2007, blew like a 20-point halftime lead in the Sweet 16 to Ohio State, lost that game at the buzzer. Ohio State went on to lose in the national championship game against Florida. Tennessee made its first ever Elite Eight a couple years later, which I believe was 2010, with a win over Evan Turner and Ohio State in the Sweet 16. And of course, Ohio State and Aaron Kraft is the reason Bruce Pearl got fired at Tennessee when he turned Pearl in for NCAA violations. And I know Aaron Kraft, that pasty point guard, was not a very popular fella in Knoxville for a long time. So you're right, not a lot of history between Tennessee and Ohio State football, but a weird amount of history between Tennessee and Ohio State basketball. Really the same with Tennessee and Michigan basketball. Tennessee's lost to Michigan twice in the NCAA tournament now.
That Jarnell
3
Stokes
times, actually.
Sweet 16.
Yeah, Tennessee's lost to Michigan 3 times. So they've had a little bit more success against Ohio State on the hardwood. But 2 teams that I don't think Tennessee's played either of them I guess they played in 2001 in a bowl game against Michigan. But
did Tennessee get screwed in that Jarnell Stokes Michigan March Madness game? I can't remember why, if so. But I think for the last couple of years, I've just been living with this memory that Tennessee and Jarnell Stokes got screwed by Michigan in the March Madness tournament. Is my thinking correct?
Kind of. I think they called a charge on Jarnell Stokes that I think was very questionable.
Yeah. Okay.
But what people don't want to remember or people forget about, I've gotten in the weeds and looked at, is I don't even remember anybody ever talking about this because the ball kind of got deflected away from them. And I think the thought it was like, okay, the ball was just going to go out of bounds. And it was, because it wasn't, I don't think it was a block, if memory serves. I think it just probably should have been a no call. And the ball kind of got deflected away. It looks like it's going to go out of bounds. The ball actually has backspin on it and stays in bounds. And a Michigan player had run over, and it would have been a steal if a charge wasn't called, is my recollection. Again, I haven't watched that play in a couple of years, but that's my recollection of it. That the call itself was bad, but unless there was a block called, which I think also would have been a bad call, Michigan was probably going to get a turnover, and it wouldn't have mattered either way.
Hey, one last thing on basketball, Jack, before we wrap this thing up, is that if you're watching this video on YouTube right now, you can go over into the Rocky Top Insider YouTube account. You can find Ryan and I's post-game stand-up from yesterday after the I can't even remember who they played. The Western Carolina game. Thank you very much. That might be our last post-game stand-up until SEC play. I'm not really sure what that Norfolk State game is going to look like based on all of our football and travel plans. Obviously, we're going to have the SEC slate completely locked down for you. But in case you just want to go and get our kind of final pre-Christmas thoughts, the MTSU game is before Christmas as well. But if you want to go and get some of our more, a little bit more detailed thoughts on where this team is, just sort of as the non-conference slate wraps up, you can go and find that video on the RTI YouTube page.
Norfolk State.
I think that's what
fighting Michael Vicks.
Yep, that's right.
Isn't he trying to get back into college? I shouldn't say back.
He's the head coach.
Dude, he's the head coach.
Oh, he is?
Yeah.
Well, there's been a lot going on here. I might have missed that exact piece of news, but that's great.
In all fairness to you, it was reported he was going to Sac State, but then that was not the case.
I don't have
now
my
he's at Norfolk
Sac State notifications.
I believe that news broke because Mike Vick posted it on his Facebook page that he's the new head coach of Norfolk State. I believe that's how that news broke.
That's great.
Straight from the source. Gotta love it.
Yeah.
All right, that's going to wrap up this edition of the Rack Top Insider Press Pass podcast. If you want to follow Ryan, you can do that at rshump00. Want to follow Rick, you can do that at Rick Butler. I'm at Jack Foster Media. And of course, follow at Rack Top Insider on all social media platforms and follow along with all of your Tennessee athletics coverage needs over at RockyTopInsider.com. Before Ryan and Rick, who will be boots on the ground in the shoe this weekend for Tennessee's first ever college football playoff game, I'm Jack. We'll see you next time.